I'm Indy Neidell.
And I'm Berns.
And this is the Baseball History Time Machine.
The one to have when you're having more than one.
That was the slogan for Schaefer Beer.
And this week it's ours too.
Remember the song? It was like, what was it? Schaefer, the beer to have when you're having more than one. That's a great song.
That's
Schaefer. I mean,
catchy.
it says you're going to get drunk. It's the beer the one to have when you're having more than one. It was not particularly good beer though.
What do we have in the fridge today for the people? I'm guessing Emery Ball Part 2, since you didn't even get to the guy who discovered it last time.
You are correct, and I'm glad you said discovered, because as I said last time, Russ Ford didn't so much invent the pitch as he discovered how to control something the ball was already doing.
So you're going to start with him?
Yes, I am, but not just yet, because I read something the other day relevant to something we recently talked about, and I thought I would share it.
And what might that be?
Well, remember in Unbreakable Records Part 1, I went on a sidetrack about Will White, and mentioned that in the first year of the American Association's existence, 1882, AA champions Cincinnati played a postseason series against National League champion Chicago. All sources do call it an exhibition, and it was only a 2-game series, not a best-of series. The teams won 1 game each, with White shutting out the 3 times in a row National League champs 4-0 in Game 1. He pitched and lost Game 2, but I don't know the score of that game. Haha, I now know more information about this series.
And how have you managed to come about such information, sir?
Because I finally got a copy of Lee Allen's classic work, 100 Years of Baseball, which came out in 1950. I'm actually holding the book up right now.
It looks ancient.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a green cover.
Yeah,
basically.
Published in 1950, it's called 100 Years of Baseball. When you think the National League didn't start till 1876, it's got a lot of stuff in there.
That's crazy.
It was the first baseball history that really went over the formation of each and all of the leagues and associations and the league wars, the reserve clause, the brotherhood, the various machinations of the owners and players. It's still a very, very good read today.
Where did you find it?
eBay.
Did you find it on eBay?
Yeah,
That's a treasure.
It was like $30.
It's in good shape as well.
Yeah, you can read this one when I'm done with
it.
it.
Okay. Yeah,
Because I'm burning through it right now.
Okay, but does it talk about the series that you just mentioned?
Yeah, it does.
What?
It does.
Okay. Let's hear it.
Okay. After talking about that season and the formation of the American Association and the resulting war between the leagues with court injunctions and restraining orders over players trying to jump leagues, the AA warned its clubs not to have anything to do with National League clubs. But the Reds and the White Stockings wanted to play this series, champions of their leagues.
Yeah.
And it was actually scheduled to be 3 games, as it turns out.
What did they do?
Here's a quote from the book, from Lee Allen.
Okay.
Resorting to a subterfuge which sounds more like something the National League would have thought of, the Reds released all their players on the day the association closed, and then the same men formed a new club to meet Cap Anson's Strong Nine.
So they weren't actually representing Cincinnati in any official, in air quotes, capacity.
Well, they were no longer the team. The team had been dissolved officially, right? So that was the idea.
This sounds like tax avoidance.
Yeah. Well, they played 2 games at Cincinnati, right?
Okay.
October 6th and 7th in front of around 3,000 people each game. And as I said, Will White shut out Chicago in Game 1. Turns out Larry Corcoran returned the favor, shutting out Cincinnati 2-0 in Game 2.
But was there ever a Game 3 or what, the plot thickens? I don't know.
Well, here's another quote from that book, right?
No?
At that point, Denny McKnight, the association president, warned the Reds that continuation of the series would mean their expulsion from the new league. Wow. And the Reds, earlier deprived of Major League Baseball for an entire year because of the expulsion from the National, hurriedly abandoned play. The association then fined the Reds $100 for their audacity in fraternizing with the enemy.
Why was Cincinnati expelled from the National League, and when was this?
It was just after the 1880 season. See, the National League had the policies of 50 cents admission, no Sunday games, and no beer or spirits sold at the park. Yeah. Cincinnati, they did the first one, 50 cent admission, and they did the second one, although they rented out their park on Sundays to other local teams. But they also sold beer, and this was intolerable.
Who would put up with such scandalous behavior?
Well, not the National League.
Apparently not.
So Cincinnati had no major league team in 1881 and then played the inaugural American Association season in 1882.
Where there were no Emery Balls.
Because Russ Ford had yet to discover it.
So, which is where we're going to be talking about now, right?
Right, I am.
You're going to drag me into this.
Finally, I'm going to be talking about it. Okay. Now, last time I mentioned that when the pitch became known in 1914, AL President Ban Johnson imposed a suspension and a fine for anyone caught throwing the pitch. According to the book A Game of Inches, it was officially outlawed by the AL February 3rd, 1915, the first pitch ever banned. It is also notable because the Emery Ball is a pitch that you only really associate with one person, Russ Ford, who, side note, was the first major leaguer born in the Canadian province of Manitoba.
Yeah, who would have thought that AL President Ban Johnson would ban a pitch? That's funny.
Gosh.
So how did he come to the States?
He was 3 when his family moved to Minneapolis. His mother, by the way, was President Grover Cleveland's second cousin.
Oh, wow.
All these side notes. After high school, Russ Ford pitched in the minors for a few years. His older brother, Gene Ford, actually hit the minors a couple years before Russ did and had a brief cup of coffee with the 1905 Tigers, going 0-1 with a 5.66 ERA in 35 innings. But he was good enough to be a 20-game winner in the minors at Minneapolis the next year. That same season, Russ was a 22-game winner at Cedar Rapids.
Wow.
Now, Gene Ford, Russ's big brother, was out of baseball within 2 years. Russ pitched well in 1907 and 1908 with Atlanta, so the New York Highlanders drafted him before the 1909 season.
Yeah, the Highlanders being the Yankees today.
Yeah, that is correct. Now, Ford was a spitballer, right? The spitball was all the rage then. After Jack Cheeseborough used it to win 41 games in 1904, and Ed Walsh used it to win 40 in 1908.
I think you once pointed out that the only 20th century pitchers to win 40 games in a season were both spitballers, right?
I did, but it's not just that. Since the modern pitching distance was set in 1893, no one else has even come close to 40 wins but those two, the closest being Christy Mathewson's 37 wins in 1908.
It's a pretty deadly pitch.
But not as deadly as the Emery Ball.
Of course not.
Russ Ford made his major league debut April 28, 1909, and it did not go well. He pitched 3 innings in relief, gave up 4 hits, walked 4 guys, hit 3 more with pitches, and gave up 4 runs. The Highlanders were unimpressed and sent him down to Jersey City of the Eastern League.
Yeah, that kind of sucks, though.
Apparently, he had a sore arm at the time. That's what his Saber bio says, so I guess it makes sense. But it also makes sense that Russ Ford really was not major league quality, which we will see soon enough.
So discovering the Emery Ball came after this little stint of his?
Actually, no. Ford himself gives accounts of how it came about in both Baseball Magazine, July 1915, and the Sporting News, April 25th, 1935. Here's the story. Are you ready for the story?
Very much so.
Okay, kids. It begins... Wait, let me journey with me in your minds to the spring of 1908 in Atlanta. Ford's catcher was Ed Sweeney in 1907 in Atlanta, and Sweeney had been bought by New York but was still in Atlanta working out with Ford before the season, right? Ford throws a pitch wide that hits a wooden post behind the plate. His next pitch is supposed to be a fastball, but it breaks sideways like a few feet. So Ford looks at the ball and notices that hitting the post of the stance has roughened a small patch of the ball's surface, and Ford, being a smart cookie, thinks that's what made the ball break, and he throws the next pitch with a different grip, and it makes a different, mysterious break. Sweeney asks, what pitch is this? And Ford just sort of dismisses it as, something I used to throw, and he does not use it that year.
Okay, and obviously not in his 3 innings with the Highlanders the next year.
Obviously not, but once he's farmed out to New Jersey, he decides to give the funny pitch a try. And before batting practice one day, uses a broken bottle to roughen the surface of the ball. To quote A Game of Inches, several slow tosses produced nothing out of the ordinary. Then Ford threw the ball harder, and the miraculous break returned. A double curve! Could any baseball pitcher dream of a sweeter thing than that? 3 Jersey City teammates flailed at the ball throughout the session without success. When it was finished, the befuddled players told Ford he was either a one-day flash or they were losing their eyesight.
Okay, this is pretty exciting.
Imagine being Ford, right?
Yeah.
In his own words, he knew he'd come up with a delivery that would make him the greatest pitcher in the major leagues if he could keep it to himself.
I think I could manage that.
Well, again, in Ford's words from the Sporting News, he went back to his boarding house without telling anyone the secret. He sat down on the bed and thought about it. Somewhat selfishly, perhaps, I felt the discovery belonged to me, and if anything came of it, I should benefit through its use. Then again, If I told other baseball pitchers about it, and they started to throw the Emery ball, it would soon become outlawed because of the advantage it gave the hurler over the batter. Berns, would you tell anyone the secret if you come up with it?
I don't know if I could keep it to myself. I'd try.
You'd
I'd try my best.
But you want a catcher to call. I mean, you wouldn't.
It would have to be me and a catcher, and
Yeah.
he would have to be sworn to secrecy. But I couldn't do that in the minors or like in not in the majors, right?
Not knowing what was going to happen.
Exactly. Only when I would
what if
actually.
you traded? What if he's traded and then?
Then we have a problem.
Yeah, but
that's
that's
a problem.
the thing.
But that would
So-
have to be my contract. That'd be like, this is my catcher. You cannot trade him under any circumstances.
Well, that's how Grover Alexander, his catcher with the Phillies and stuff, went with him to Chicago and stuff.
see?
And okay, Alexander had all kinds of problems in the 20s with epilepsy and alcoholism, but definitely some of his tailing off had to do with not being with Bill Killifer, who was his
See,
catcher.
so it's been done before. So it wouldn't be a weird request from me personally.
No. I mean, Cy Young had his catcher.
There we
People
go.
had-
There we go.
people had their
He's
catchers.
my guy.
Okay,
you know?
I don't think I would tell anyone. Maybe a catcher. I don't know. But then again, how drunk would I get? I go, hey, want me to show you something? Then go show people Emery Ball.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the thing. Ford realizes he cannot just take broken glass out on the mound with him every game. Somebody's going to ask a question about that. So he experiments with a few different things, and he finds that emery paper, sandpaper, does the trick. So he sews a little square of it onto a glove. Sews it right onto the glove.
That's pretty creative and pretty sneaky.
Now, his catcher that year during the season was Larry Spar, and Ford does not tell him what the pitch is. And Ford goes to his mouth all the time like he's throwing a spitball, right? He also takes his glove off the field with him after each inning, which players didn't usually do. They just left them on the field when they'd go back to the dugout.
That would be pretty suspicious if everybody leaving their gloves on the field and he's just like got it tucked under his arm.
All the time.
Is he worried about germs? Is he worried about
he thought
the
of
sun,
that.
or-
He thought of that. So soon enough, he moved the emery paper to a ring he wore, and he cut a little hole in his glove to scuff the ball through it.
Like, I'm gonna guess Ford was a sensation that year.
He sort of was. Jersey City was a last place team. So his 13-13 record was pretty good. And he did have a 2.41 ERA. But he was a sensation enough that George Stallings, who managed the Highlanders then, in July bought Ford's contract back. Ford could not pitch the rest of the year, though, with the Highlanders because he was sidelined with a spike wound.
You forget sometimes how tough the game was back then. Like, just to get anywhere, really. Because
With a
remember,
spike wound, too.
like,
yeah.
like the wounds and the injuries and the overuse. And then you don't have stuff like, oh, I'm just going to go watch a video on this guy.
Yeah.
It doesn't,
No.
there's nothing like that. So, okay,
Okay,
I feel for them.
here's the thing.
Yeah.
1910 rolls around, and Russ Ford unleashes one of the greatest rookie pitching performances of all time.
As good as Paul Skeens.
Better than Paul Skeens. Yeah, to everybody out there, better than Paul Skeens. Ford wins his first 7 decisions and ends up 26-6 with a 1.65 ERA.
What? 165 as a rookie and a 26-6 record to boot. That's
Also,
madness.
using modern stats,
Yeah.
he had an 11.4 WAR, which is slightly better than Bob Gibson's was in 1968. And he led the majors, including position players in that. And his 5.8 hits allowed per 9 innings also led the majors. And as long as we're making comparisons, that was also better than Gibson's in 1968. But, who's the all-time hits per 9 innings leader? Nolan Ryan. That 5.8 hits allowed in his rookie year is better than all but 2 of Nolan Ryan's
I can't
career
believe a
seasons.
rookie can put up such numbers.
Because the Emery Ball is the best pitch ever developed.
Yeah.
Ford, he had some good fortune as well because his catcher was Ed Sweeney, the guy he'd first discovered the pitch showing to. So Sweeney was in on the secret and could call the pitches, like we just talked about, right? Ford's roommate, Eddie Foster, apparently also knew about the discovery.
And how did the Highlanders do?
They finished second to the A's, but still 14 games out of first.
Right.
They likely would have only been a 500 team without Russ Ford.
And how did he do in 1911?
I'll tell you in just a second. Can you imagine a rookie
That's
season?
1.65 ERA and an
26-6
WAR.
Yeah, 11.4
11.4 WAR.
as a rookie with one
Can
pitch.
you imagine if somebody did that today? They would, the media would collectively melt down.
Yeah, well, we melted down over Skeens.
Yeah, of course, but I mean, like something like that, he would have to do. They drug test this dude every
yeah,
game.
yeah.
They would zoom in. They would check his equipment.
Yeah.
They would thermal scan this man to see if he was an android.
Thermal scans would be great to see. Hey, He's an android.
He's
Yeah,
an android.
That was
yeah,
his
exactly.
secret.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
How did he do in 1911?
He did great. Not as great as 1910, but he went 22-11 with a 2.27 ERA, but still great.
That's only 2/3 of a run higher.
Yeah, but that's also the year they introduced the cork-centered baseball, and so offense boomed a bit. So compared to the league, he was about the same, his ERA, compared to the rest of the league in both years.
So he's still the boss.
Yeah.
Does this continue then?
Not so much the next couple of seasons. Ford has arm issues.
No.
Though his 3.55 ERA in 1912 is still better than the league average, but he goes 13-21, leading the league in losses, although with a 4.9 WAR. The problem then is that the Highlanders lost 102 games and finished dead last in the American League. They finished 7th in 1913, but losing 94 games. And Ford goes 13-18, though his ERA drops nearly a run to 2.66. So he's still really good.
Yeah, that's still decent numbers. Yeah.
I mean, he's still all-star quality.
Yeah.
Right. Thing is, in 1913, Ford realizes that his secret has come out at least partly, becoming convinced that Cleveland's Cy Falkenberg is throwing Emery balls.
You're going to sidetrack to Falkenberg now, aren't you?
I am not.
Okay.
Though I will get to him soon, I promise.
Okay.
Ford confronts Falkenberg, who makes a semi-denial, but Ford also warns him whether or not he's throwing the pitch, don't tell anyone about the pitch.
Okay, but
Keep it a secret.
But how could Falkenberg discover it? Like, I don't
Ford ponders this question.
Yes.
And later on, he will say, in his words, he remembers that a certain New York infielder used to pick up the ball I used every time an opportunity presented itself and examine it.
And who was this mysterious infielder?
Ford never said specifically who it was, but there are enough clues to figure it out.
Yeah, of course.
Remember those first three guys at that minor league batting practice when he first tried the pitch out?
Yeah.
Right? One of them was Earl Gardner. Now, Gardner played second base with New York behind Ford in 1910, 11, and 12.
Yeah.
But mid-season in 1912, he lost his job and was sent down to Toledo, where one of his teammates was former Major League pitcher Cy Falkenberg.
Former?
Yep. Okay, now I will sidetrack.
Plot thickens, because I mean, that's enough evidence to kind of like put together.
Especially since Falkenberg's back in the majors. But let me. I want to get ahead of myself. Okay. Cy Falkenberg was described as the most unlikely pitching star of the dead ball era. Fred Falkenberg, that was his name, pitched at college and wanted to be an engineer, and baseball got in the way.
Yeah, it has a bit of a habit of doing that.
In June 1902, Falkenberg broke in with Worcester in the Eastern League, and he was great. He won 18 games just over the rest of the season, and he earned a call-up to the Pirates, for whom he went just 1-5 in 1903. Okay. Falkenberg later would say the problem for him was he could get by on just speed in the minors, but to succeed in the majors, he'd need a good breaking ball, and he didn't have one then. So he spent a couple more years in the minors, and then was back up in the majors for round 2, this time with Washington.
Was he a bad pitcher, though?
No, he wasn't bad. He just wasn't good.
As good, maybe.
But Washington was terrible. They were a terrible team, and he was with them. He was slightly below average. He did give up Ty Cobb's first career home run.
I mean, call it a day then. That's your claim to fame. But you in the Hall of Fame, maybe not by yourself, but because that is the first.
Wait, you're gonna like this one. Okay. Here's another great piece of Cy Falkenberg trivia. He was also the first pitcher post 1900 to hit a grand slam.
Oh, wow. Was he a good hitting pitcher?
Absolutely not. This was the one and only home run of his entire career, and it was just a shallow Texas leaguer that barely cleared the infield, dropped into shallow right field, then took a weird hop and rolled under the stands. But it's bounced fair, so it was still a fair ball. And the bases were loaded, and everybody scored.
That's a crazy play. Okay.
Now, Falkenberg was actually the tallest regular player in the major leagues at that time. He was like 6'6", like 2 meters tall, like Randy Johnson. Basically.
Someone put a basketball in that boy's hand. Come on.
The Sporting News described him, I've written the quote down, in 1911. No one could call Falkenberg ideal as to formation.
Yeah.
He's built on beanpole lines, stands several inches over 6 feet, and carries just enough flesh to knit his bones together. The thing is, he was considered something of a curiosity.
But that's hilariously funny.
I know, that's why I quoted it. That's why I wrote it down. I thought that's
incredible.
A hell of a good quote.
Okay, but to be serious again. But he left the majors again.
Not yet.
Okay.
He was sold to Cleveland, who were a good team.
Yeah.
And for whom he was a fourth starter and was more or less league average.
Okay, so here comes the very obvious question for me. Why was he called Cy?
You know, funny enough, Cy Young was his teammate in Cleveland, but it was not there that he got the nickname, since it appeared in the Washington papers before he ever went to Cleveland.
Okay.
I do not actually know why he was called Cy. He has a pretty good Sabre bio, but it doesn't say there either. Well, whenever he picked it up, or however, maybe because he was a fastballer in the minor leagues and Cy Young was a Cyclone Young.
Sure, I guess.
A lot of people got the name Cy. Like if you were a power hitter, they called you, and you were called. Your last name was Freeman. You were called Buck. There was a lot of Buck Freemans because of the big star Buck Freeman.
Of course,
If Freddie Freeman was playing back then, he would have been called Buck.
Okay, we can call him Buck now.
I am totally down for that.
We're calling him Buck Freeman.
And we
from now
absolutely are.
Buck is at it again.
Buck Freeman once
Buck
again.
Freeman
I got to
once
talk about the old Buck Freeman when he hit 25 homers in 1899. That was as big a deal as Ruth smashing the record with 29. It was unheard of.
Yeah, this hadn't happened before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyhow, back to Cy Falkenberg. Gosh, I could sidetrack about Buck Freeman forever. Cy Falkenberg did not get along with Harry Davis, who took over managing Cleveland after 1911. So Falkenberg's major league career seemed over when he was sent down to Toledo.
And that's where, what's his name was?
Earl Gardner.
Yeah, who presumably taught him the pitch. Man, I'm having
Presumably,
a nightmare
yes.
today.
Presumably.
How did Cy do in 1912?
Armed with the new pitch, Cy Falkenberg went 25-8, earning himself a third shot at the major leagues.
Okay, that time was pretty great though. Like that's pretty good. 25-8.
Well, that was in the minor leagues.
But still, that's decent.
Okay, you want to know how he did when he got back to the major leagues?
Yeah, let's hear it.
He was great. One of the best comeback seasons ever. Back with Cleveland, he went 23-10 with a 2.22 ERA, and he also tried to hide the nature of his pitch, calling it his fall away in interviews. And his pitch was seriously effective against lefties because of its movement. And that season, none other than Hall of Famer Home Run Baker said his fall-away was superior to Christy Mathewson's fadeaway.
Okay, that's a pretty big compliment.
That's a huge compliment.
That's huge.
Falkenberg, though, he was a really interesting guy in general. He did not, as it turned out, work in the off seasons as an engineer, but as an upholsterer for a car factory, making like seat cushions and back cushions. He also, in 1913, became a director of the baseball players fraternity, which was the forerunner of the players union.
Interesting. He must have gotten a pretty big salary bump after the pitching comeback.
He did, but not with Cleveland. See, they couldn't reach a deal, but remember, the Federal League was about to be a third major league in 1914, and that circuit would pay a lot of money to land major stars.
Yeah, exactly, to like get the talent, right?
And by this time, Falkenberg and Russ Ford were major stars. Falkenberg signed a 3-year contract with the Federal League for $15,000. That's $5,000 a year, which was way more than the $32.50 he got in 1913, and the 2,300 or so he averaged his whole career before that.
Okay, but hold up. So Ford jumped to the Federal League as well?
That he did for $10,000 for 1914, according to BaseballReference.com. Falkenberg pitched for the Indianapolis Hoosiers and Ford for the Buffalo Buffs.
The Buffs?
The Buffs. Oh, yes.
So what were the other teams named in the Federal League, out of curiosity, because these names are crazy. The Hoyers and the Buffs?
Oh, well, the Hoosiers. The Hoosiers sorry. In order to finish in 1914, it was the Hoosiers, the Chicago Shy Feds,
That's so
the Baltimore Terrapins, the Buffalo Buffs, the Brooklyn Tip Tops, the Kansas City Packers, the Pittsburgh Rebels, and the St. Louis Terriers.
These names are...
I love
something. Yeah, there's something. And how did our Emery heroes do?
They were not actually called the Buffs. They were called the Buff Feds, as in Buffalo Federal League. And Chicago, the Shy Feds. Now, interestingly enough, you look at the Lee Allen book, and the Chicago team is referred to as the Whales. And now, I have read that before. Maybe it was just the fans that called them Whales, and their official name was Shy Feds, or the other way around. As for the Brooklyn Tip Tops, reading the book here, Robert Boyd Ward, a self-raising product of the bakery business who entered the picture in Brooklyn. Right. The veteran baseball historian Fred Lieb has pointed out that baseball was spared its worst possible name when Ward was prevailed upon not to call his team the Tip Tops, which was the commercial name for a certain type of Ward's bread, although the name which finally was selected for the Brooklyn Federals, the Brook Feds, was possibly the most preposterous appellation ever given a club, an incident which the historians of bizarre Brooklyn baseball have largely ignored. Now, Baseball Reference, though, lists them as the tip-tops. However, since Lee Allen wrote this in 1950, and it was only 35 years after this, and he had been around, I'm inclined to believe him. Make up your own minds, though. Falkenberg went 25-16, pitching a league-leading 377 and a third innings.
Wow.
Yeah. He had a 2.22 ERA overall, which was fourth in the league. He led the league in both strikeouts and shutouts, and he also retroactively led the league with an 8.7 WAR.
Jeez, what a year.
Ford was pretty much as good, though some arm issues meant he only threw 247 innings. Right?
That's insane.
But he went 21-6, leading the league in winning percentage, WHIP, ERA plus, and saves retroactively with 6.
Okay, who led the league in actual ERA?
Spitballer Claude Hendrix, who went 29-10, 169 ERA, 7.1 WAR. It's a tough call to say if Falkenberg or Hendrix would win the Cy Young that year if they had a Cy Young award.
Why does the name Claude Hendrix sound familiar? It sounds super familiar.
Claude Hendrix's name maybe sounds familiar partly because he was a Cub after the Federal League folded, and you're a Cub fan, but likely because of 1920.
So what happened in 1920?
On September 4th, 1920, the Chicago Herald and Examiner reported that the August 31st game between the Cubs and the Phillies was fixed in favor of the last-place Phillies. Hendrix had been supposed to start that game, but Cubs president Bill Veeck Sr. got both phone calls and telegrams saying gamblers were betting heavily on the Phillies. So he pulled the assignment from Hendrix and gave it to Dode Alexander. Now, the Phils managed to win anyhow, but it turned out that Hendrix had supposedly placed a bet against his own team with him as a starter before being pulled. A grand jury was immediately convened to dig into not only that game, but gambling in baseball in general, and the focus turned from Hendrix to the 1919 World Series.
The Black Sox scandal.
That's what blew it all up. It started with Claude Hendrix.
Okay. What happened to Hendrix?
Nothing was proven against him, but he never started another major league game.
I mean, you get a bad rap, right?
He went to sell cars in Kansas City. That's what he did.
Well, as you do.
Yeah.
Why not?
I guess. There's worse things to do once you've been banned. He went semi-unofficially banned from baseball.
But once you get that reputation, nobody's going to want to touch you. Right. Because you are obviously working against the interest of any baseball team that has the. And everybody
was being banned officially or unofficially. Remember, Benny Kauf couldn't play anymore.
There we go.
But Hendrix, Ford, and Falkenberg were the three best pitchers in the Federal League in 1914. Maybe add George Suggs as well.
Why not?
But here's the thing. The cat was out of the bag regarding the Emery Ball.
And whose fault was that?
I'm not really certain. A Game of Inches says Falkenberg told at least one Cleveland teammate, George Kaler, who wasn't actually very good with or without the Emery Ball. But Ford has this to say. It wasn't 2 months after the opening of the 1914 American League campaign, every hurler sought to take his turn on the pitching peak and fling the Emery Ball.
Yeah, that's what we talked about last time.
Yeah, with like Smokey Joe Wood and all. But we only talked about the AL. But the pitch made its way to the National League as well as the American and Federal Leagues.
Yes,
Russ Ford suspected that the culprit for that was his former manager George Stallings, now managing the Boston Braves.
Okay.
Jimmy Lavender of the Cubs was apparently the first guy in the National League caught with Emery paper, and soon enough, the whole fiesta was traced back to Russell Ford. The Sporting News wrote October 1st that Ford's double-barreled spitball was nothing more than the Emery papered style. As it turned out, Ford's old catcher from the first Emery pitch, Ed Sweeney, taught a few Yankee pitchers how to throw it. People talk.
Yeah, but why would Sweeney talk, though? He didn't for years. He kept it to himself.
But he didn't plan to. Cub boss Frank Chance said Sweeney only began showing people the pitch when he saw George Kaler using it.
So then it was banned. And what happened to Ford and Falkenberg?
Well, it was banned in the Federal League as well. In 1915, Ford was 5-9 without it. And his ERA came close to tripling from 182 to 452 for just a 70 ERA plus. When the league folded, he wrote to New York, who he was supposed to go back to, and he said he could not win in the major leagues without the Emery Ball.
Just being honest.
And he was given his words. He was given his release, and in his words, wearily, I backtracked the paths of my greatest successes to the baseball minors.
Could he pitch in the minors?
Ford was 33 in 1916, and he went 16-9 with Denver in the Western League, but he did have a 4.11 ERA. And after a few games in 1917, he hung up his spikes for good. In 1989, he was inducted into the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame. Yep.
Okay.
He did have a 2.59 career MLB ERA.
So the jig was up, but not entirely for him at least. But what about our friend Mr. Falkenberg?
Cy Falkenberg was a better pitcher than Russ Ford without the Emery Ball. He actually had a major league career without it.
Fair enough.
He was good enough to at least be in the major leagues without it, right? The Hoosiers relocated to Newark and became the Newark Pepper. Falkenberg pitched pretty poorly with them, going 9-11 with a 3.24 ERA, which was worse than league average. But in late August, they were tied for first in a crazy 5-way pennant race that on paper looked super exciting. They were tied with Kansas City. Pittsburgh and Chicago were both 1.5 games behind. St. Louis, 4.5 games behind. So Newark traded Falkenberg to second division Brooklyn for young Tom Seaton, a 25-game winner in 1914. But Seaton was a bust, going 2-6 for Newark, and they finished in fifth, 6 games back behind all those other teams I mentioned. And Falkenberg had a last hurrah, a 1.50 ERA in 48 innings for Brooklyn without the Emery Ball.
That's pretty good.
Falkenberg pitched 2 pretty good years in the minors in 1916 and 1917. He went 19-14 and 11-6, but with 181 and 199 ERAs, which were the best full season marks of his whole career, major or minor league. But a 4th major league attempt in 1917 did not go well. He was not good enough to stick even with the last place A's, going 2-6 with a crappy ERA, and that was his big league career over. However, he did appear in 12 major league seasons. He won 130 games. He had a career winning record, and none of that he would have had without the Emery Ball.
Well, you said earlier that it was a pitch that could make a minor league pitcher a major league star, a guy who otherwise had no business being in the major leagues at all, which I guess is a good description of Russ Ford, unfortunately.
It is. It's the truth. Yeah. But hey, I'm going to leave you with something else, a suggestion by Russ Ford, a hunch, if you will.
I'm intrigued.
Ford suggests that George Stallings, his old manager who went to Boston, the Boston Braves, taught the pitch mid-season 1914 to his starting trio of Bill James, Dick Rudolph, and Lefty Tyler.
And why does he suggest this?
Remember, 1914 was the year of the Miracle Braves. They were in last place on July 4th, and they'd lost over 100 games in 4 of the 5 seasons before 1914, right? Those 3 pitchers had 1 shutout between them at the time, July 4th. But after that, they had 18. Bill James, who didn't even pitch in April, was 7-6 on July 4th. In the last 2.5 months of the season, he went 20-1 and finished the season 26-7 with a 1.90 ERA. He won exactly 5 more career major league games after that season, though he did supposedly have some arm issues.
What about the other 2 guys?
Dick Rudolph went from 6-8 at the start of July to finish 26-10. And then he led the league in losses in 1915. He did have a decent 1916, but not like 1914. Lefty Tyler was actually the worst of them in 1914, and he was the one who had the best seasons of them all later in his career. He was 5-8 in early July and finished 16-13, but he dropped his ERA well over a point from 3.90 to 2.72. Now the Braves didn't just come back from last to first. They won the pennant by 10.5 games.
Jeez. So they were in last place in July.
They climbed out of the league basement on July 19th and were in first place for good September 5th, walking away with the pennant. In September, they were 26-5. In August, they were 19-6. For the second half of the season, they had a 792 winning percentage. That's nearly insane. An 800 winning percentage.
That's insane. Like that's so hard to compare. It doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make sense. They had to have some.
So that's what Russ Ford says.
They've been busted. But
George Stallings was his manager in New York.
Oh,
too.
There we go. Everybody, if you didn't know before, we've busted the Miracle Braves.
Then in the World Series, they swept the mighty Philadelphia Athletics in 4 straight games, which was the first ever World Series sweep, and there wouldn't be another one until 1927.
Yeah, and that was with our friends at the Yankees, Mr. Roof and Mr. Gehrig.
Yes. So it is suspicious, and it is implied, Russ Ford implied, the Emery Ball was the reason, but I don't think we'll ever know the truth for sure.
It would have been awesome if we two were the ones to discover the real secret behind the Miracle Braves of 1914.
It would. So I'll tell you what. Let's end this and let's start reading old newspapers and
So
see
no,
what
if
we
we
can
leave.
turn up.
All right, everyone, that's it for today. Remember to follow us on Instagram and Facebook and ask us questions there, and we shall answer them.
And go to go to patreon.com and join us there so we can one day buy our own minor league team, or we can get lots of old newspapers and try and figure out if the Miracle Braves had a wee bit of help from some sandpaper, right?
I think that.
And if you join us at Patreon there, you'll get episodes a day or 3 early and you'll make us happy. So, Berns, you want to take us home?
Yeah, sure. That's it today from me, Berns,
And me, Indy.
and the Baseball History Time Machine.
Woohoo!
Woo-hoo!